It's absolutely a legitimate question. I accepted Soviet military surplus once. You know that? Somebody gave me a gift. I remember I went to a store in Chicago, and they had a military surplus store. And in one part of the store, they had American military surplus. I remember specifically they had the ribbons, little ribbons that you would put on your dress uniform. And they had a variety of them, and they had a chart that described what certain ribbons were. And it was in a glass display case right at the front of the store. But it was a four cabinet glass display case. And on the other side, they actually had medals that were from the former Soviet Union. And I remember looking at them. And I remember there was a section of the store that actually sold what it identified as Soviet surplus. This was from the former Soviet Union. Somehow these uniforms had been brought to the United States and they were for sale in the United States in a place that also had what was identified as military surplus, army surplus, which included uniforms. It included what, well, now might be called PPE, right? But it's not actually PPE. And other things, including some survival items. What might be called survival items, but it's actually not. At some point in time, I found forms. The kind of forms that one would have to fill out if, for instance, they lived on a military base and they were actually acquiring new uniforms, or in some cases, as it happened, if the uniform was in a certain kind of quality, you would turn it in. You would give it or sell it to the post exchange or the specific shops on the base where people who were new and were coming to post were coming in and they may need another uniform. A brand new uniform can be pretty pricey. You might need more than one shirt, you might need more than one pair of slacks as part of whatever it is you're doing. And so you might go on site, on the base, and you might actually acquire what might have been very, very good condition, but still used items that somebody else had. Maybe you get a new duty assignment. You might have a different uniform requirement. So it doesn't really make sense for you to transport uniforms that are meant for one post or one position to that other base if you're going to have to acquire new uniforms in order to be able to do what you need to do. There's a place there, presumably, that you're supposed to be able to leave it. And there's actually forms. There are specific forms about those inventories. Now, did the Soviet Union have something comparable? When the Soviet Union was decommissioning, and it was in a situation where somebody at some point made a strategic decision about the polity and the economy of what they were intending to do in the post-Soviet period, they were going to allow for military uniforms and other items associated with service in the Red Army and the other branches of the armed services to be made available for acquisition in countries outside of the United States. And I say acquisition because, for instance, I accepted a gift. Now, if I was running for public office at the time, which, by the way, I was too young to run for public office, but if I had accepted that as a gift, would I have to report that? Would I have to report that as a gift? And at what point, what price would I list it as? Would it be something that could be used in an inventory that could then be collateralized as a form of loan? And what would be the tax rate? You see, these are things that I was not apprised of at the time, right? I was under 21. I was certainly under 25. And I was among a generation of people that were in the same situation, a comparable situation. So now, all this time later, well, I come into possession of something else, a legal book. Nobody told me that the Soviet Union had legal books. So the thing is, this is not even a military surplus. This is a book made by Americans that went to visited the Soviet Union in the 70s and did their own analysis and interpretation of the Soviet legal system up to and including the Constitution, and published it through an American university that had its own project, its own joint study. It means that around the time in 1977 this was published, there were people that were in university in the Soviet Union that were engaging with people from the United States that were involved in some sort of academic arrangement where they would communicate. Were there people maybe who are now in the post-Soviet political sphere, both in the United States and in the countries of the former Soviet Union that would have been attending school, including law school, in 1977? I think there were. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty certain I've met some of them, right? Actually, in person. That I've met some people. That if they weren't in school, they may even have been in a position where they were an instructor or a teacher. Right? Is that what you're concerned about? Does it seem like I might be involved in some sort of conspiracy? Oh my goodness. She accepted that book. She didn't pay for it. She stole it. No, I didn't steal it. I was refusing to allow for young people, including minors, to be made to pay for something they should already have had. That's a judgment call I made, right? Because I know what it's like to be a young person and have somebody else think that it was okay to loan me out. The problem is that once they loaned me out at 15, 16, they didn't stop. And in the meantime, they re-upped. And some of those loans came due recently. And somebody tried to close them out. And I contended then, and I still contend, that it wasn't under official, verifiable, legal context. And I have a right to be able to live in comportment with the law. So let's try this a different way. I haven't done this before. Death penalty, Chapter 7. The Constitution of the United States expressly refers to the death penalty. The due process clauses of the 5th and 14th Amendments state that no person shall be deprived of life without due process of law. The grand jury clause of the 5th Amendment ensures that no person shall be held for a capital crime without a grand jury indictment. These provisions make clear that the Constitution allows imposition of the death penalty with due process and after indictment. Among historians, there is no serious doubt as to whether the death penalty was an accepted form of punishment when the Constitution was adopted. In 1972, however, the Supreme Court effectively suspended use of capital punishment on the grounds that its arbitrary administration violated the 8th Amendment's prohibition of cruel and unusual punishments. Although it later affirmed the death penalty's constitutionality, the court over time added a number of restrictions governing both who could be subject to capital punishment and the discretion juries should have to impose it. The court said that its determinations about whether imposition of capital or other severe punishments is impermissibly cruel and unusual are governed by consideration of the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. Justice Scalia was an ardent defender of the government's authority to use the death penalty as it saw fit. He voted to uphold application of capital punishment to 15-year-old and mentally retarded convicted criminals. His argument was, not surprisingly, a textual one. Capital punishment is explicitly contemplated in the Constitution. Moreover, he contended that the 8th Amendment's prohibition of cruel and unusual punishments represented no barrier to capital punishment, since its use was rarely, if ever, cruel, and could not be considered even remotely unusual in light of its use throughout American history. Now, I've read several of the opinions written by Justice Scalia in this book. Yeah, I've even made voice files, including one opinion that I've made several voice files on, and somebody else decided, for whatever reason, that they were entitled to steal. But I have not, as of yet, opened to this chapter until right now. This is very important. What are the cases for concern? Atkins versus Virginia, 2002. Roper versus Simmons, 2005. This is Glossop versus Gross, 2015. And so there's three opinions included in here. It would seem that now is the appropriate time for me to review them.